I didn't know he could do that.
I didn't know that either. No, just kidding.
That's horrifying.
He just turned me off.
Which is not the point of the podcast. It's to turn people on.
I don't know. This episode might not be the sexiest. Okay.
Speak for yourself.
Right, Eric.
I'm sorry. Wow. God, we're 5 minutes into this and we're getting just shots fired at me.
Juicy. Okay.
All right. Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. If you're listening to this, I just want you to know this is just for fun. We're idiots just having a good time talking about sex in space. This is not for education. This is not for anything serious. It's just for a good time. So stick around, hang out, have fun, tell your friends about it, and let's get the show rolling. Alicia, good morning, and welcome to another exciting rendition of 0g-SPOT podcast. How are you feeling this morning?
Oh, I'm feeling fantastic. I am ready to learn. This is a topic today that I know almost nothing about, so I'm ready to just have a lot of questions.
Absolutely, me too. We are, or at least I am, incredibly not qualified to talk about any of this stuff, so I'm excited that we definitely have someone who is. But what we thought we would do is kind of get everyone on the same page, right? This is episode 2. We need to all have common themes, common understanding, and the biggest thing is really understanding how the body works in space, because we'll get to all the sex stuff, but I think to understand all of the rest of it will give us a really good place to jump off from.
Yeah, how does zero gravity affect a body, a human body, and all of our biological functioning? But also, how does being in space affect us in other ways, like the size of the cabin, affecting your vision? There are lots of other influences and factors that go into how your body is reacting when you're in that environment, besides just zero gravity.
Exactly. And intimacy is more than just physical and mental, it is very biological. And, overcoming whatever happens to you in space is going to be part of the process, right? I know that astronauts get nauseous for the first few days they're up there, which can really kill the vibe. And so, understanding a lot of that and how the body works in space and microgravity and all of that, I think is going to be really crucial to making sure that if you're setting up a nice romantic date in space, you're not totally screwing yourself.
So, who do we have on today's episode to talk about human bodies in space?
Yeah, let's bring her on, Dr. Sheyna Gifford. Hey, how are you doing? If you want to...
I'm doing great. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, excited to have you. How about, let's tell the audience, who you are, what do you do, what brings you here today?
Hi, I'm Sheyna. I'm your friendly neighborhood space doctor. Now, that can mean a lot of things, so I want to be clear. There are people who take care of astronauts who are up there right now. They mostly work at NASA, ESA, JAXA, Roscosmos. I work at the Mayo Clinic. I take care of people who fly aircraft, some of whom do very high altitude things. I also take care of people who go to low altitudes, so people who dive, people who fly. So I take care of people kind of right up to the Kármán line, which is where space begins by definition. There's no beginning. You don't just get a green light like, congrats, you're in space. But suddenly the indicator starts floating. Suddenly you can no longer fly a winged plane because the atmosphere kind of runs out. That's the Kármán line region. So I take care of people kind of up to that region. And then my colleagues at various commercial and government entities take care of the rest.
Yeah, I think you do a little bit more than just the aviation side. I think you're involved with some space-related projects. So I'll say that you have a bit more street cred on the space side than that. But super
Sure.
excited to have you here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. How can I help?
Well, I have so many questions for you, Sheyna. Thank you for being here. I am someone who is not well versed in biology and the way that human biology reacts to extreme situations. And so,
Mhm.
my first question is, when you're looking at the sort of hierarchy of concern of what could make those extreme environments fatal to someone, is there a something at the top of the hierarchy that you have to be, cognizant of?
Oh, yes, many things.
Okay.
On the biological level, there's really only about three things we know of that humans will not adapt to, given an infinite amount of time and an infinite amount of resources. And that's low oxygen, right? Can't get past that one. Low air pressure, got to be able to get the oxygen through the lungs, and then radiation. We aren't good at adapting to that over time. We don't get better at dealing with that. We get better at dealing with pretty much everything else. The nausea, as Eric mentions, 90% of people do experience that. It's an imbalance between what your eyes are seeing and what your ears are experiencing. And when people experience that after about 3 days, most people, 90% of people, shut it off. Their brain's like, don't need that. We're just going to ignore all that. Once in a while, though, somebody's brain just won't let go, and then they spend their entire time up there puking. And once in a while, so on the other side of the curve, right? 10% here, 10% here. The 10% over here feel fine the whole time. The really sad part is you won't know where you fall on that curve till you get there. So you could be the ultimate roller coaster adventurer, skydiver, race car driver, iron-eared, ace pilot. Get up there and puke your guts out the whole time. That, in fact, has happened. It happened to a pilot named Garn, who was also a politician in the U.S. And he thought, I'm great. I pull 0g maneuver, high G maneuvers all the time. I'm an acro. I'm going to be great. Yeah, no, puke the whole time. Puked so hard that they actually named a scale of vomiting after him.
That's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how sick you are can actually be measured in Garns.
Oh,
That's
poor
amazing.
guy.
I
Yes.
can't wait for something completely random like that to be named after me. Like, that's exciting.
I think we should actually, based on your performance in Astro Access on the parabolic flights, I think we should name how quickly people get up and start to walk when they weren't previously doing so. You don't have to walk. You can propel by any means you choose. But if all of a sudden you weren't walking and now you are, I think the rate of adaptation to your new environment when you start to propel in a whole new way, I think that should be named the Eric. You
Ooh,
just pulled it. You just pulled an Eric. You just got up and went.
that is true. For anyone curious, on some of the parabolic microgravity flights we did simulate lunar gravity, and I found that I could stand in lunar gravity, and I am unable to do so in Earth gravity. So that was a huge discovery for me, and it was kind of just like an instant clicking of that happening on the first flight, and then with the second flight, I actually got to experiment with it a bit, and it was really cool.
So that could be the Ingram, how quickly you adapt to your environment and do something entirely new, measured in Ingrams.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I will submit that to the naming stuff union, and we'll get that moving.
Copyright
Excellent.
that immediately.
Immediately. So, Alicia, though, to answer your question, biologically, you need at least to be able to survive the oxygen, the air pressure, and the radiation.
Mm.
But once you got that and you've just done the survival thing, in order to get to intimacy, reproduction, even just health and happiness, you need a couple more things. Biology is about a third of it, psychology is about another third, and then social interaction, social engagement, and support is about a third. So all those three things kind of need to be in place on Earth too.
Kind of want to ask
Hmm.
you, like, what is your interest in space? What drives you to want to research about space and that sort of thing? So,
Ah, yeah, that's so why somebody loves space, is inspired by space, wants to get engaged with space is highly personal. And yet I think all of us would probably answer the same thing, which is we can't help it, right? We can't help but explore. Some humans want to explore the ocean. Some people want to explore the forests, the desert, the atmosphere, right? We just happen to be interested in the stuff above the atmosphere. So be it, right? But I think every human has an exploration drive, and ours just happens to be aimed at several hundred miles and beyond. And I don't remember a time when I didn't feel that way. My earliest memories are actually the launches, or Sally Ride going to space. I was probably about 5, and saying, "Hey, that's cool," but I just assumed women went. I was not cognizant of the fact that she was the first American female. Didn't think about, oh yeah, that's cool. But if I hadn't seen Sally Ride, I don't know how engaged I would have been in human space flight, because my earliest space memories of the Viking Mars landers, one of which launched on my birthday before I was born in 1976, September 9, 1976. And the other one launched not quite when I was making memory, but I remember when it arrived and was taking pictures. And I looked at the pictures of Mars, and it looks just like parts of the desert outside of where I grew up in Los Angeles. And I said to my father, "Hey, that looks pretty cool. Can we go?" He just shrugged and said, "Yeah, why not?" I mean, he remembers people walking on the moon. He remembered a school teacher of his saying, humankind will never walk on the moon because God will strike them down. And when they did, my father turned to him and says, "Looks like God's all right with it." And so same thing. I said, "Hey, Dad, can I go to Mars?" He said, "Oh yeah, why not? We can do whatever we set our minds to. We can do whatever we invest ourselves as a society and individuals in. If you want to go, then go." The cat, speaking of aliens, the cat has invaded. I told you I couldn't keep them out forever. So one of the mammals has joined us. That's Rocket.
Nice.
Rocket.
Nate,
We always
Rocket.
we always appreciate a good animal sighting. So
Yes. She's named after a person, believe it or not. My
Oh.
mother's best friend, Beth Rocket.
wow.
That's just a coincidence. So yeah, always been interested in space, always been interested in human exploration. Robotic is great and amazing and absolutely has its place. Love my friends at JPL and all that they do. But always been interested in human space flight. And even though my first work in space was building satellites that went around the Earth, my second and great love was building spacesuits for planetary exploration, for Mars exploration specifically. And those plans are still out there. Hopefully we'll need them in my lifetime, and we're still continue to refine those designs. So making human life in space possible, safe, pleasurable, for us to really live there, not just work there, but really, really succeed there as a species has always been something that's interested me.
Excellent. And if you had unlimited budget and resources, what sort of testing would you do, experiments you would run, missions, etc., related to space would you do or have done?
Well, all right. Managed to do the space X-ray stuff on basically zero budget. The carrier absorbed most of the cost of the upmass. Thank you to the carrier. And then my industry partners, KA, a Canadian company that makes the panel, Min X-ray, an American corporation that distributes the generator that takes the pictures. They absorb the cost of the units and the training time. And of course, the commercial astronauts, one of whom dedicated their space time to taking pictures in space, not once, but twice, April 1st and April 4th. And we're very grateful for that. But I didn't have a budget. That was all volunteer on my side of it, right? The Mayo Clinic didn't kick in money. It was just, we put it together on a string and a prayer. So, but really when it comes to any great endeavor, especially space, you kind of fail your way there, right? You blow up rockets until one doesn't blow up, right? And so far we haven't lost a human in space. On the way to, sadly, yes. Coming back from, tragically, yes. But actually in it, we haven't. That is in a large part coincidence and a large part diligence, but entropy happens and there's only so much you can control. So I think, especially given all the space debris increasing every day, we need to figure out the space debris problem so we don't spend billions of dollars putting structures up there and then have them destroyed by space debris. That's a solvable problem and one we need to solve. So let's get that done. Let's figure out how to get space debris clean and at least keep a corridor where things in that corridor are safe and all the space debris down to grains of space sand, which are constantly falling on Earth. Hundreds of tons a day of space sand fall on the atmosphere daily. It's okay. We can deal with that. But anything about much, much larger than that that's accelerating around the planet can destroy structures passing through and living in our low Earth orbit. So we need to get that We need to get that solved because it's just going to kill people until we do. And then putting up a lot in that corridor, that safe corridor, putting up a lot of habitations so people can just fail their way there, right? Get the social dynamics. Social dynamics isn't a problem to solve. We're humans. We're chemistry. We're not robots. So it's always going to be a moving target, but kind of build up techniques to keep social structures in space valid and vibrant, even when we're not just locked in and doing a job, right? When you're there and you're not going home at the end of the day, how do we de-stress? How do we experience pleasure? How do we grow food in enough quantities? How do we eat? How do we sleep? So they can work on these problems in situ and start to come up with some of the solutions. When our immune system tanks in space, which it does, it tanks, and all of those viruses and infections we had as children or young adults reactivate, how do we deal with it? How do we prevent it? And then, of course, how do we get gravity in space? The real artificial gravity mystery, which is kind of the holy grail of life in space. If we can find a way to impart even fractional gravity, we are going to be so much better off physically and probably psychologically to a certain degree. So getting structures up there that spin and rotate, whether it's on a tether or part of a large solid structure, we can figure that out. If we can do that, if we can get a clean, safe corridor with structures that are experimenting in artificial gravity and in supporting functional human life, that's what I would do with my money. And I wouldn't just do it for space. I would do it for Earth too, so that we can build structures down here that support life, even as the planet becomes more extreme. And then, of course, with all my excess dollars, we're going to have to do carbon capture and find a way to fight climate change so that we don't turn Earth into Venus. Like a lot of people want to turn Mars into Earth. Knock yourselves out. Not going to happen. There's no magnetosphere. The solar wind just strips away all the atmosphere that planet generates. So not going to happen. But please work on that tech. Do that thing. Awesome. I have a whole TED talk about it. Literally, go watch the TED talk. But when it comes to Earth, don't turn Earth into Venus. That's what we're doing, and we need to stop that. We need to stop that now. Grow up a little bit. It's grown up time. It's been fun. We've been playing in the sandbox, but now we need to be accountable for our actions and make good choices like any adults as a species. Time to grow up now. So we need to dedicate ourselves. If we're going to continue to be polluters of this planet, I think we are, then we need to just dedicate ourselves to counterbalancing our choices and finding a way to make, don't drink to excess. Just have a little tipple.
Little moderation.
We need to little something, right? We need to live moderately enough on the planet so that the planet can exist in balance with us. And that's what I'm doing with my excess dollars. So the planet lives in balance with us. Everyone gets food and healthcare and education. We're thriving and surviving in space. Everything is great. Now we're living that Star Trek universe we all want. So basically, with the infinite dollars I now have, we're living in the Star Trek universe. Does that answer your question?
I love it.
Yes, and that ties into another episode we'll be doing later this season. But I always like the saying, solving for space solves for Earth. And I also have some very strong opinions about Mars, which most of these space bros don't like. But I would love to hang out in a Venusian balloon, just cruising the upper atmosphere. But Alicia and I were actually having a conversation the other day about artificial gravity and how do you make gravity work. And I explained the concept of O'Neill cylinders and the High Frontier by Gerard O'Neill, which, finances aside, was an amazing amazing book of its time, and really kind of delved into the how you would develop artificial gravity space stations. And so definitely something we should have on the horizon.
Oh, yeah. But, artificial gravity is something we don't need for Earth.
Correct.
We need a lot of stuff. We need robust, it's called the closure index, is how much stuff you keep inside your structure. And even the ISS leaks. It leaks air, it leaks water, right? And radiation leaks in. Now on Earth, we have the Van Allen belts. So again, we're infinitely lucky. Every day we wake up, we are under the shield of the planet. And that's amazing. Most planets don't have that benefit. We do. So we're in the triple point zone. We got water in all the phases. We got these beautiful shields. We're set up perfectly. We just have to make the most of it. And let's say we do get the planet in balance. There are people who are still and always have been living in extremis. And if we can provide them with the pods that provide them with food and shelter and space in which to survive and thrive, even if they're out, out in the Gobi Desert or in Siberia, wherever they are doing their thing and they're very happy doing it, that's great. But then we can provide that high closure index environment for them, so they have some place to retreat to as needed. We should have those in cities for disasters. Okay, the tsunami's coming, great, get in your pod. Hey, the giants, the hurricane is coming, category 5. Yep, you know what that means. Go get in the pods. Okay, giant tornadoes coming, underground pod time. We just need to have this technology for ourselves, deploy it equally, accessibly around the planet for all the peoples. And then they can be living there, but they can also be retreating there as needed. And then when it's not needed for retreating, it can be used for work, play, science, sleep, storage, whatever you want. But I think investing in these structures, and in countries like ours where there's a lot of abandoned structures, abandoned hotels, abandoned shopping malls, you can turn those into experimental environments. How, empty out the mall, fill it with pods, see how it's going. How do you do that work there? And then when the big bad thing is coming, into the pods. All right, we're only going to be there for a limited time. And then, even if a lot of the infrastructure just got destroyed in the tornado, the hurricane, at least it's a base. We can go out, clean up things, and go back to the base at night to eat and sleep. So, we need these structures to exist, these high closure index, very, very robust structures. I'm not an architect by any means. I'm not even an engineer technically. I didn't go to school for that. I've done some. But I do know that's what we need, because much like I'm not an atomic physicist, but I know that it would be great to have atomic power, but we don't know how to make that safe for people. We need to make that safe for people so that humans can have it. Until we know how to deal with the toy, we don't get to play with the toy. So I want atomic energy to be safe for people, and I want there to be safe infrastructure for people. So that's what I want for humanity, is all the toys safely used, equitably deployed.
So I think to kind of dive in this and get just like a baseline with different systems in the body, when it comes to microgravity, how does that specifically affect the body? I mean, obviously there are, the circulatory system, the digestive system we talked about a little bit, muscular, what happens with your eyes. I'm just curious if, and this might be a bit broad, but like if you can kind of give an overview of just what happens when someone goes to space. And we can talk about, for right now, like the short term. So say you're going up for like a 2-week trip, vacation, jaunt. What kind of stuff happens to the body?
Okay. Well, there's a whole lot of categories and a whole lot of textbooks that cover this, but sort of in brief, in the very, very short term, the things that are pretty obvious have a lot to do with fluid shift, sleep, and smell. Interestingly, yeah.
Smell?
So right away, smell, right. So, we can start with the nausea you talked about, space adaptation syndrome. And that even happens on real, real short trips, like the one Eric and I are on, although that's not quite the same, right? But it is a disconnect between what your eyes are seeing, which is, in our case, people bouncing all over the inside of the plane, and what your ears are telling you, which is that you're not moving, or you're not moving in the same frame of reference, right? So that disconnect between your eyes saying, no, you're pretty much just standing still, but everyone's flying around you, and actually you're slowly rotating too. The endolymph, this fluid squishing around the inside of your inner ear, goes, yeah, you're actually moving. Your eyes are like, maybe. And then everything gets a little bit confused. And then in the confusion, you develop some nausea, which is why when people are on those microgravity flights, we say, don't move your head fast. Slow is the new fast, right? So when you go up to space, it's the same. You'll see people coming through the hatch on the ISS. They hug their colleagues, and then they just stay very still. They don't immediately start flipping out, or if they don't want to puke, they don't, right? Now, the other thing is that they will be taking anti-nausea medication, most of them on the way up, certainly when they get there, for a while, if not for the entire time, for as long as they need to. And that's just preventative, right? But medicine can only do so much. It can make you feel less sick, but it doesn't actually stop you from getting sick. So the other thing people often do is they often limit the amount they eat and drink, at least initially, until their bodies adapt. Because when you eat something, right, your esophagus does you a solid and moves it down towards the stomach. Well, the stomach is an empty sac, at least initially. So the food will then bounce around in every degree of freedom possible. Whee! And fluids will bubble. And that bubbling and that bouncing is not something your body is used to. And so it can bubble and bounce right back up. But if you have an empty stomach, there's really nothing much to vomit, but also that bubbling and bouncing isn't happening. So, you sip, don't chug in space, at least initially, to all our space travelers. And you keep the food very light, very neutral, and very sort of limited until everything settles down a little bit. So that's the GI sort of shortcut. But what's I think even more important is the vestibular piece, the brain and the ear and the eyes trying to come to terms, trying to come to an agreement about how we're going to feel about our new situation. And that usually takes a good 2-3 days. So if you limit the amount you eat, move slowly, move your head and body together. And when someone is flipping out, just look away. Okay, they're doing their thing. I'm just going to stare at this wonderfully still wall for a minute. After 2 or 3 days, you can go back to eating and drinking. You can go back to kind of moving a little more naturally, and you can start enjoying your microgravity environment with less fear, right? Because your brain, eyes, and ears are now more or less in agreement for most of us. But the last piece that's really got to be on board is the sleep, right? Your circadian rhythm in a place that is loud. Space vehicles are loud, bright, the lights are on most of the time, and where you're bouncing around very slightly as you attempt to nod off to sleep, your brain may or may not decide that it's going to let you really sleep when you're not lying on a flat, quiet, dark, still surface, right? How many of us have fallen asleep on a train, fallen asleep on an aircraft, right? It's not good, high quality sleep, typically. So are you getting good, high quality sleep in that environment? And if you're not really awake. You don't really sleep. You don't really wake up. And then you don't really feel great and enjoy yourself. So you have to find a way to eat and drink in a limited way, look around and move slowly and get some good sleep in those first few days. Then after those first few days, let's say you're headed to the moon, you're going to take a little moon cruise. So you're cruising out to the moon. Maybe by the time you get there around day 2, 3, end of day 3, you should be feeling hopefully pretty good if all those pieces are in place.
Okay, so for any of our space travelers, make sure you're booking at least 4 days.
So you can enjoy at least the second half of your trip.
Exactly.
I have so many follow-up questions. So sleep. You mentioned people can take nausea medication to deal with the nausea component. Do astronauts take sleep medications to knock themselves out?
They do. They do if they need to. Those are available. So there's an Astro pharmacy. It's up there. You can crack into that thing for whatever you need. A couple of things about that. I noticed that myself during my space simulation. I never quite slept for about a year because I was on call as the only doctor on duty in the longest Mars simulation in US history for a year. And I never quite slept waiting for the alarms to go off, right? It only happened once, but psychologically I was aware it could happen at any time. It's like sleeping with your pager on. Or when I was an EMT, sleeping in the truck, right? You loosen your boots a little bit, you lie in the bed and you wait for the next call, but it could always come at any minute. So you're at work, you're not at home. The call can come, you're on call. So the lights and sirens could start screaming at any time because a micrometeorite punctured the outside of the vehicle. Or there's a solar flare coming and you have 8 minutes to get into the solar flare shelter. That's about how much warning you've got, right? Or something has gone wrong with the engine. So when you're in the ISS, you're in free fall. You're actually not in microgravity. You have Earth's gravity is fully in play, pulling you down. It's just that the force of going around the Earth is perfectly balancing that. So if at any time the ISS isn't accelerating the way it should be, all the lights and sirens go off if you start to lose altitude or go to the wrong altitude, right? So you could be awoken at any minute. You need to be fully awake in that moment.
Mm.
So if you knew that you needed to be awake at any minute, fully awake, on deck, locked in, ready to perform, how much sleep medicine would you take?
Yeah.
Probably not as much as you'd want to.
Probably not as much as you'd need to. You would
Yes.
shortchange yourself. And speaking of shortchanging, space people, doctors, high performers, they tend to shortchange their sleep. It's a thing. We don't go to bed until everything's done, and everything is never done. So even though they have strict bedtimes, yeah, try telling that to an astronaut.
Oh,
Time to
I'm
go to
sure.
bed, kiddo.
Yeah.
Come up here and
Who's gonna
make me,
stop
Dad.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like telling my 8-year-old with the iPad it's time to go to bed. It's like, say what? Except that you can't take the iPad away because they're several hundred miles away, right? They're going to have, stop staring out the window at the glory of the earth and go to sleep. Let me think about that one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or no.
Or no, right? So you're seeing the sunset if you're at the level of the ISS, that the sun is rising and setting every 90 minutes. Your brain does not know what time it is, right? The ambient light is even, doesn't change throughout the day. Sun is rising and setting outside the window all the time. So your brain does not tell you it's time. So taking melatonin like we do on Earth, maybe an hour before it's time to sleep, that's reasonable. Can you get yourself to a place where the light is starting to fade or it's starting to be quiet and your brain can start, the actual hormones in your brain can start to put you to sleep? If you can create the right environment for sleep, if your sleep hygiene is good, hopefully you're sleeping. If you're not, you should be able to take a pill, hopefully to make you sleep enough, but not so much that you don't hear the lights and sirens. Or if you don't quite hear them, your crewmates wake you up, you're still on deck. So yes, you can take meds, but probably you're not going to as much as you need to.
Interesting. Now I'm thinking of a idea of like, do astronauts throw on sunglasses like an hour before they go to bed? Like,
Good question. We've tried that. We've also tried, well, it's less sunglasses than shifting the lights. There's a
okay.
program to help with sleep hygiene and lighting that's been studied extensively in Antarctica too, because same thing, right? It's night or it's day, right? Depending on where you are, when you are, right? Sun up all the time, sun down all the time for months at a time. So they have worked on moderating their own environment to create a circadian rhythm artificially. It's a moving target, and not everyone's circadian rhythm's the same. So the ambient environment be great for one person and totally dysfunctional for another, especially because some of us are night owls, right? And we have a totally different circadian rhythm. So it's a challenge, and making it work for every person in that environment is always going to be a challenge. So yes, we'll need some personalized something, right, to really probably help us out on the individual level.
Do astronauts practice sleep hygiene and sleep schedules before they actually launch?
I'm going to say yes, with the knowledge that pre-mission time is insane. Eric knows about that. You're in the hotel together, you're living with all the people you're about to launch with, go on a mission with, be that, a several hour parabolic flight, several days, or a several minute suborbital flight, several day orbital flight, or several week sortie to the moon. You're all together, sequestered. You have a ton to do. Mission prep never ends. You just get kicked off the planet eventually, whether you're ready or not. So, but you're still like, it's up to the last minute. I didn't sleep several days before both my Astro Access flights. I wasn't getting a lot of sleep before the recent SpaceX mission where my team did a bunch of research. I didn't sleep much before either of my two space simulations. So you're trying to, you're doing your best to comply, but then, your plans meet the enemy of reality. So yes, in theory, probably not that great in practice.
I mean,
It's
just like the Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
And life is continually punching us in the face.
Absolutely.
That's wild to me though, because we know so much about how sleep affects ability competency. And for these astronauts to be in a life or death situation every minute that they are up there and needing to function at their absolute prime, and for sleep to not be as much of a priority, that's wild to me.
It's wild. But you know what, Alicia? I didn't get to the last thing I said. So I talked about sleep and I talked about nausea, vomiting. I haven't talked about the smell part.
Right.
Oh.
So you get up there. The reason, we've got 5-6 liters of blood. Most adults have about that much. And the reason why some of it is below our waist is gravity, right? Gravity's pushing us down all the time, right? Squishing us down. And then the mechanical action of our walking helps squish it back up. Arteries have muscles to squeeze, veins are floppy. So when blood gets down to the legs, the arteries aren't going to do that much. The veins are in charge of getting it back up, but they don't have squish. Fortunately, you walk, your big muscles of your legs pump and squishes the blood back up towards your heart, back in that heart, back to your lungs. Well, suddenly gravity's not pushing you down. Blood is no longer pooling in your legs. It's getting there, but it's kind of like a hose where the tap is half or more off. And where's that blood instead? It's in your head. It's in the upper portion of your body. So that's why you get the puffy face, chicken leg syndrome in space. And when all that fluid is in your head, it's pushing on your eardrums from the inside, pushing on your eyes from the back, and filling up, pushing on your nose, kind of causing there to be extra fluid in your face, squishing everything and kind of throwing your smell off. So your face feels full. Some people even get a runny nose. You're not smelling a lot. Does things to your appetite, but also does things to kind of like your ability to just sense stuff and taste stuff. And I want you to think about what it would mean if you could only taste like a 30% of the food you were eating, unless it was very, very spicy, right? So everything tastes off, smells off, which is probably for the best because space doesn't smell that great. At least if it's not a brand new, freshly clean vehicle, it doesn't smell that great. So, okay there. But yeah, your smell is off, which means your taste is off, which means your diet may be off. Your caloric intake may be off. So astronauts do eat on a regimen, on a strict schedule. Eat this much. But if you don't tell them to, or if they're a tourist and they are allowed to eat what they want, they're not under doctor's orders, they're not being told what to do, they may not be eating quite appropriately. So, sleep is off, food is off, vision and hearing is off for at least the first few days. And we don't have a lot of experience, but as far as we can tell, a 2-week trip is going to be enough for your smell to come back online fully. So you might not be eating the way you normally do. So you might not be feeling quite the way you normally do, unless you force yourself.
Yeah,
unless the app tells you, do it. Oh, okay.
I mean, I like that kind of, other people managing me because I'm terrible taking care of myself. But, one thing I've seen is like astronauts when they go up, like they will suddenly use a lot more like hot sauce and flavor things than they usually do because of that lack of taste or things like that.
Most popular meal, spicy shrimp. Pour on that horseradish. Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to imagine how that affects the way that you excrete biological waste. I know only a little bit about that process in space, that now there are vacuum toilets installed on bigger, space stations. But that I know it's about aiming very precisely into this specific, vacuum sealed hole, because if you break the seal and you don't aim precisely, your waste is going to float around in the cabin.
It's true. Unexpected excretion is a little unusual because most people up there are pretty constipated.
Mm.
And again, it's about the squish, right? So your veins aren't squishing your blood up your legs, all your fluids in your face. Your bowels have slowed down. The bubbling and gurgling, it's got a great word, berborgamy. borborygmy, which is tinkling, means tinkling. It's a Greek word, borborygmy. That the amount of bubbling and tinkling in your gut way drops away. It's a little bit of a shock factor, a little bit of the normal amount of blood circulating around there is much less. You're not eating as much, right? The air that there should be air in your gut, right? But the pressure of that gut system is a little bit off. And you're not walking, and you're moving. I tell people, you're moving your bowels when you're walking. You're moving your bowels when you're walking. And so if you don't propel with ambulation, a lot of people who don't propel with ambulation need to assist themselves with digestion, either with a lot of hot water, extra fiber, stool softeners, laxatives, things that pull water into the gut. And astronauts take a lot of those too, in order to try to regulate their bowel movements. Have one, they wake up, they pound a pouch or two of coffee, and they time it, right? Because you don't want to be having to have your bowel movement in the middle of an EVA, in the middle of a serious maneuver where you're trying to dock a visiting vehicle, right? You want to be able to time it. So a little constipation is actually okay, because it's not going to tell you when to go. You're going to tell yourself when you take your meds or you squish down your coffee. But because the gut slows in space, accidental, unexpected pooping, a little less common. It's more like, oh, I really would like to go now, but it's just not happening for me. So, yeah.
We'll be right back. Don't go too far.
Bodies behave differently in space. Hydration floats, skin gets confused, sensation changes. At Ready Set Jet, we know this firsthand because we've actually been to space. RSJ is the world's first biotech skincare brand certified for space. Our Beauty Baton spent 18 days in orbit, traveling 8.4 million miles on the Axiom 4 mission. Waterless, zero mess, designed for bodies in motion, on Earth or off it. Discover Ready Set Jet, groundbreaking science, great skin, any gravity. ReadySetJetOfficial.com.
Welcome back to the 0g-SPOT.
So, what I'm hearing overall is that being in space is massively physically uncomfortable. You have a puffy, swelled head. You can't smell. Maybe your nose is running. You have nausea. You have sleeplessness and fatigue. You have constipation. I can't imagine, even after you've spent enough time in space, noticing all of these factors combined, being able to feel in touch with your body and your sense of pleasure.
Mm. The good news there is the human brain is incredible at ignoring stuff. We will ignore the heck out of everything if we decide to. So talk to any parents of a newborn. How you doing? Well, yeah, I'm tired and I'm not eating right. I'm not exercising right, but I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy. I'm riding that. Well, hopefully I'm riding the high of having this little thing around, and this little thing is super cool. Right. And so, yes, in the case of new parents, your hindbrain has reached its tentacles up to your neocortex and it's squeezing, telling you everything's okay. No, really, this is fun. You're enjoying yourself, right? Otherwise, that's going to be the only kid you ever have, right? So there's lots of systems that kick in to say, yeah, everything isn't optimal, but everything is still okay. That's one thing. Two thing is that astronauts in general are high performers for whom discomfort is kind of the baseline. You got to the ISS on a trip that wasn't comfortable. You were shoved in a tiny space with a bunch of people while wearing an escape suit, and you were there for days, maybe. You got to the ISS, you got to actually get out of the suit, give people a hug, maybe have some hot meal, which you haven't had on the way up. This is great. Life is great. I'm rocking this. So it's all about circumstances, Is it more comfortable than life on a submarine where people are serving for months at a time on a sub? Yeah. How about more comfortable than carrier, being on a giant aircraft carrier, a floating city? In some ways, yeah, you got a much better view. You have a lot more freedom to move around. But yeah, comfort and human beings being able to be in touch with their bodies is that, in a way, a lot of that psychological piece and that social piece, right? Yeah, biologically speaking, you're right. It's not your baseline. You might not be as comfortable as you would be at the Hilton Resort on the beach, but the other two pieces might really be compensating for that. So it's a good thing that we're only 30% biology, and we also have the opportunity for the other two pieces to come into play.
I think you see the differentiation with the people in society who are like, yes, I will go to space. And then, there's the kind of like, I would go to space if I had the opportunity. Then there's the group is like, I would never go. And I suspect if you had those various groups of people in space, the ones that are like super gung ho would probably adapt better or compensate better than those who wouldn't, or those who didn't want to be there. And I could imagine that if you are going on a pleasure cruise, let's say, you probably want to make sure that both or all of you are in that first category.
Yeah. If you're going on the pleasure cruise, you're here to have pleasure. Let's do it. I'm going to ignore the uncomfortable stuff, right? And just enjoy, right? Being on a Carnival cruise ship is also not totally comfortable, right? Tiny cabin, lots of people, ships, waves buffeting the ship, a little bit, maybe you're a little bit seasick, but you're there to have a good time. So you take your meds, you put on your mask, try to put yourself to bed on time, try not to drink too much, and get as good sleep as you can so you can have a good time when you're awake. And when you're awake, you make the best of it, right? And it's not dissimilar to that. Humans make the best of their circumstances. That's something we're very good at.
Can I ask a question about blood flow? Because you had mentioned that the blood usually flows upwards to the top half of the body. Is there any science or research or testimonials from astronauts themselves about whether there was the experience of an erection or enough blood flow to the genitals in order to actually have that occur?
That's a good question. And the answer is, I don't know, because that would be behind the curtain, right? So astronauts are public servants operating in the public space. They are literally at work. And unless sex was their job, unless it was part of the mission to go up there and engage in some sort of intimate act and report on it, that information would not be in the public space. It's an interesting balance because the entire time you're up there, you're being paid, okay, hazard pay, but you're being paid a public servant's wage to do a public service, right? You are allowed some amount of privacy. Your calls with the space doctors are private, whether they're psychological or biological, right? That's private. Your calls with your family are private and off the record, right? How much time you get to do it though, and when you do it is part of the schedule, and that's public record, right? So you do get a private life, but it's highly restricted, and it is yours. Hygiene is yours. No one has the right to that. And your sleep time is your time. You do get private bunk time, but it is private. So you're not going to report on that publicly. Now, are you going to talk to your flight surgeon about it? I would hope, if you'd like to, but that is all inside the black box behind the Iron Curtain of your privacy, which is so limited. The public doesn't tend to violate it if we can behave ourselves well enough to. We ask a lot about pooping and peeing in space, but we tend to stop short of the intimacy part because that is very much the final frontier, right? That's what you own. That's yours. So in order for us to really see through that curtain, we're going to have somebody who either doesn't draw the curtain or the curtain is transparent. Right? They will have gone up there and been transparent about the fact that that's what they're there to do. And then they can be transparent with us about how it went. I can tell you that the hormones change a lot. So you're in a stressful situation, you're at work, you have to perform, you've got an incredibly tight schedule. Schedules are down to 5-minute increments on space if you're there to work, right? All day long, every day. You literally have a schedule that's like a bar and the arm moves across it. and will start to flash red if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? It's not, oh yeah, it's not a pleasure cruise when you're out there to work. You're there to work, and they expect a lot of you. Your time is valuable, so you're running on full speed all day. You don't just cut off at night, but you're also biologically stressed out, right? Your whole body's adapting, everything's shifting, eat, sleep is off. So what we do know is your cortisol is high. We have people spit into tubes. We test their saliva. We test their blood too. So stress hormones are high. When stress levels are high, the endocrine system tends to tune down the hormones involved in reproduction. So we do know that testosterone tends to run low in space. With women who've only ever been 12% of space explorers to date, there's a natural fluctuation, which has been measured. The thing is, women of reproductive age tend to suppress their fluctuations because menstruating in space is just inconvenient. It's messy. Blood gunks up the water reclamation system, which processes urine. So it's ideal to not menstruate in space. So most women are flatline when it comes to their hormones in space. Now, that is what it is, but it prevents us from really understanding the natural fluctuation, right? So we don't know a ton about women's hormonal fluctuation on Earth either. But in men in space, we do know that testosterone is lower. So, and that's probably a direct function of the cortisol being higher.
I think with the history of NASA and the space industry, there's been a real hesitance to explore any sort of processes or anything that's not directly tied to the mission, right? Anything to do with just basic health, NASA has done decades of research on related to that. Anything ancillary to that, either they just kind of turn away and ignore it, or it is very hush hush. And, that's just kind of due to the conservative nature of an industry that was originally based around the military, environment. And so I would like to think that, as commercial space flights continue, private space flights, either working or, just for enjoyment, go out there, I'm hoping that there will be more, if not scientific, studies on various kinds of uh, systems in the body, maybe at least like colloquial stories. Like if you do send up commercial astronauts, maybe they are a working mission, but like there is like okay, did you experience X how many number of times? And there could be a comparison to life here on Earth and things like that, because sexual arousal doesn't always have to be directly tied to an act, it can just happen. And
it can just happen. Yeah.
And so like, I would like to hope that as these commercial flights continue, maybe more of those kinds of data points start to trickle out into the public sphere.
Right.
For sure. I mean, we want to make space and space for real life.
Yes.
And in real life, everyone out there, hi kids, real life sex is a part of real life. Intimacy is a part of real life. Emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, it's part of life. And if it's not there, it leaves a vacuum. There's plenty of vacuum in space. We don't need more vacuum up there. So let's make space for that. But it's a conversation we need to have, because again, you don't just have the biological piece, you have the psychological piece and the social piece, right? And the social piece expands into the domain of what we consider to be individual privacy in space, because space, occupiable space, habitable space, is at a premium in space. Mm-hmm. And so where are you engaging in those intimate acts, right? There's no private sleeping quarters in the currently designed space mission. People are sleeping communally. And in all my space sims, there were private sleeping quarters, but since then, one of them has changed and there's no longer privacy, because that's operationally realistic, right? There's just no space for that, right? So if you don't have privacy, that's okay. In most of human society, we still managed to reproduce. If we were living in communal longhouses, if we were living together in caves, if we're living together in, mobile nomadic communities, there's very little privacy. People still manage to reproduce, but there are understood social norms about it, right? And in countries developed enough to have space programs, the social norm is your intimate acts are done privately, right? That's a social norm. So if it's not going to be the norm, everyone on the mission needs to discuss it and agree. When does it happen too, right? You're supposed to be sleeping. Now's the sleep time. Get your sleep. Okay, well, if now's going to be your intimacy time, are you impeding others' ability to sleep, right? Are you sleeping in shifts? Have you offset your sleep cycle so that you can have some private, intimate time and not invade the attempts of others to get restful sleep, right? So this actually has to be a part of mission planning, is what I'm saying. Is if you're going to make space for intimacy, physical intimacy, it just has to be part of the mission plan. Where you do it, when you do it, and then, of course, who you do it with. Because this is a crew. And even if you're on some kind of a pleasure cruise to the moon, right, you have a role. You have to be prepared to fulfill that role. And one of the things you have to be prepared to do, even if you're not flying the rig, helping with navigation, making sure the water and air recycling is perfect, even if you're not crew with a crew role, let's say you're on a cruise type thing and there are attendants for all of that, you still have to agree to be a part of the team and not impact other people's experiences, right? You know, knockdown, drag out fights in the hallways of cruise ships are not considered optimal either. Everyone's there to have a good time. You don't want to invade someone else's good time. So you have to be emotionally intimate, stable, and able to have that kind of relationship without impacting other people's experiences. And that's a challenge too. So this becomes a conversation that encompasses the whole mission planning for when and where and how, and then who, and are you in a stable enough relationship to do this respectfully and have it not impact mission operations? So it can absolutely happen. It's just a conversation. It's a series of conversations.
That's all totally in line with what I would expect. And I think down the road, we're definitely looking forward to doing some episodes on habitat design for a pleasure cruise or just, a something that isn't mission oriented. And then also the aspect of crew dynamics. So both of those are like super important topics that, we're looking to plan to get into as well.
Yeah, I think for me, Eric had mentioned NASA and some of these other traditionally hegemony, the hegemony of space industry has traditionally been focused on what Eric described as basic biological function. And anything tangential to basic biological function has not been a priority. But as someone who works in the sexuality field, I know I am biased, but I deeply believe that sexual functioning and sexuality, human sexuality, are a basic building block of our biology. And so it's really interesting to hear that the interplay between social norms, expectation of privacy, and sexuality have made it so that this is an arena of the body, of the human body, that has not been reported on and has not been, as far as we know, studied or documented as much as any other biological function.
It is. It's very interesting because it's relevant, right? It's mission relevant to the greater human mission of human society. But what we need to understand is space has been a microcosm, right? Equivalent to being on a military maneuver, right? Where the mission of the military maneuver is not pleasure or reproduction or even to mimic human society. There's a goal to the maneuver, right? You're a peacekeeping mission. You're an invasion. What you're a rebuild. Both my grandfathers were engineers and helped rebuild after the Second World War, right? They were not there to reproduce. Their spouses were at home, incidentally. But had their spouses been there, that would not have been the goal. It might have happened incidentally, but it that was not the purpose. So far, all of our trips to space have been so intentional, right? And I hope, as a sexual expert, I'm sure you agree, sex should be intentional too. Very intentional, hyper intentional, in fact, right? But the intentionality of space missions has not been focused on that. It could be, right? There could be a very intentional movement, and I think there should be around all sex. I don't think it should be accidental. Spontaneous is fine, but accidental never, unintentional never, right? And so I think it's okay that it's going to have to be intentional. It's just not an intentional movement that has occurred yet, because basic survival comes first, as you know. And so in the Maslow's hierarchy, right, which is very artificial and probably not accurate in many ways, the reproduction happens after you manage to escape the puma. You gotta get away from that puma if you're going to reproduce. And so far, we've been so busy fleeing the puma, and with our cortisol levels high, with our breathing rapid, which happens in space too, you breathe faster, even though technically you're respirating better. Your blood actually flows all the way to the top of your lungs, which on Earth it doesn't do. It hangs out more in the middle and bottom sections. So it's getting to all the lung space. Your diaphragm actually lifts up 2 whole rib spaces. So it goes from hanging around rib 12 to hanging around rib 10, right? Because gravity ain't pushing it no more. So even though your lungs are a little littler, you're breathing a little faster. You're breathing just fine, but it is kind of like your body thinks you're running from the puma. So we're going to have to psychologically get ourselves comfortable up there too. And you talk to astronauts and they will often endorse they're very comfortable, but they're also doing what they've been trained to do, right? I'm also comfortable giving CPR. I've been trained to do it. I once sawed someone's chest in half, opened their ribs like a book, and massaged their heart. I won't say it was comfortable, but I was doing what I was trained to do, and I was locked in that moment. If you'd asked me about my comfort, I would have been like, yeah, of course, why? Right? Absolutely. Why do you ask? I'm holding someone else's heart in my hand and covered in blood. It's fine. But I was doing what I was trained to do, right? So far, we haven't sent people to space to do anything except what they were trained to do and what they needed to do what they were trained to do, right? So now if you're going to go to space, even if the space has been made, you need to figure out how to shower, how to be clean enough to feel good enough to have physical intimacy. So hygiene, right now it's bed baths, occasional put the bag on the head and soap it out, but your body is not as clean as you are used to being. You smell different. You don't smell your partner, right? How does it feel to be with someone you don't really smell, right? How does it feel to know that there are people very close by? So you're going to have to prepare yourself psychologically in that construct. And we have space analogs. You can go into a space analog with your crew and see how it feels and build up those strategies for having a good experience. But it's going to be like anything else in space. You're going to need the practice. And of course, then you'll meet the punch in the face of reality and stumble your way through that. But it is going to take practice. And of course, good sex, good intimacy takes practice and work. So that's okay. But it is going to have to take planning, a lot more planning than it usually takes on Earth, although, people don't put enough work into it here anyway.
So we're going to have to send up professionals is what I'm hearing.
That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm saying. At least professionals involved in the mission planning process. Everyone is an amateur when it comes to doing something the first time. I don't care how often you've practiced.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so, so much, Sheyna. This has been an incredible conversation. I feel like I know so much more about the human body and the ways that zero gravity and that movement of liquid throughout the body can affect you. Are there any other elements to being on a space station that affect your body that don't have to do with gravity?
The constant awareness of the presence of others, physically and virtually. So most missions are very heavily monitored, at least in the communal spaces, and you're aware that you're not alone. right? So if you're going to go up there and be intimate with yourself or with another person, how does that constant presence of others affect you psychologically? Are you an extrovert like me, like Eric? We're like, hey, everybody, how you doing? Or are you an introvert where you really need to control your space? You need to have a lot of agency there. And how does that affect your comfort level? So again, that psychological piece is big. And then socially, how what's the dynamic, on your mission and your crew, and how comfortable are you with each other and talking about these things? So it's those things are different than they are on Earth. They're very different. And I think it's going to be really interesting in our lifetimes to see how it plays out, because we're going to see it in our lifetimes. And that's really exciting.
I can't agree more. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add, to plug projects of yours, to tell us what you're working on next, or tell us what you're excited about in your work forthcoming?
Sure. Well, my space X-ray team, with the assistance of some wonderful commercial astronauts, took the first X-rays in space recently. And I'm really excited that that is an option for space, that we can now monitor bone health and other kinds of health using that modality. I mean, humans have been going to space for more than half a century, and the only way we had to look inside the human body was an ultrasound. And now we have X-ray and we have DEXA, and that's amazing. I hope that what that means, though, is that more humans on Earth will have access to X-ray technology, because believe it or not, it's still quite a rare thing. We here in a developed nation who can just pop down to the corner urgent care and get an X-ray of our hand are blessed. We are fortunate beyond reckoning. And there are still, the majority of humans can't get the care they need, can't get the imaging they need. So we're hoping that, having proven that this works in space, we can get portable, accessible X-ray to all of humanity, to get their tuberculosis diagnosed and treated, to get their dental disease diagnosed and treated, to get their bone disease diagnosed and treated. I'm excited and hopeful that we can do that. I'm excited and hopeful that a lot of my colleagues who have dedicated their lives to space can continue to do that, and that people who want to be involved in space needs everybody. Space needs you. The question is, do you need space? And if you do, I hope people have the opportunity to engage in space in a way that's appropriate to them, whether it means physically going there, supporting people who want to go there, designing stuff that goes there, talking to people who hang out there. I don't know if anyone out there knows this, but you can apply for an uplink to talk to people. There's an open call. Say, hey, I want to talk to the astronauts up there. And you can do it. They tend to favor school groups, but you can do it if you can ask for it if you want. I just hope that people's hope and people's joy is still going to be inspired by space, and that space will continue to be a public good, as it has always been.
Awesome. And your insight has been amazing, and I hope that everyone is interested in space. I suspect the ISS will not accept a call from the 0g-SPOT podcast, but here's hoping.
You never know, but certainly maybe the commercial crew will. If you have a friend who's going to go up there, they might call you from up there. I think we know someone who's going. Who's going up there that we know, Eric?
Ooh, we do know Michi, but that's a pretty short trip.
It's a short trip, but you can make a call during that trip. Ask Michi to call in from her suborbital. Oh no, she's going on a very short trip. Yeah, yes. She's going to go on a parabolic. Okay, so we'll have to wait a bit. Yes. She'll probably be busy during those 8 minutes when she's up in space.
Although I do know one of
definitely wave.
I do know one of the Fram 2 astronauts, so I did miss out on that opportunity. I did know one of the Polaris astronauts. So I just got to plan better in the future.
There we go. It's a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. In the next year, Virgin Galactic, if they stay on course, is going to be flying 700 people to space a year. They are going to instantly double the number of people who have been to space within the space of a year. And that's just Virgin. That's not Blue. That's not SpaceX. That's not Sierra. Sierra's vehicles coming online. That's not VAST. That's not Paragon. That's not any of those amazing commercial entities. So wait for it. That's all. When it comes to space, wait for it because it's coming.
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
All
my
right.
personal goal is to be in the 3-digit club, so that's what I'm aiming for. But
I'm
TBD.
with you. I'm with you. I'm right there with you. You go first. I'll be right behind you. And if you need support to get there, you know who to call.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Shayna. I mean, wow. I think we have found an incredible resource and ally in Shayna. I think that everything she had to share was so relevant and so interesting to me.
Yeah, Shayna is awesome and provided us some amazing pieces of data and stories and all of that. And I learned a ton today. I don't know about you, but even with my background in space, like I feel way better educated on what happens to the body. Almost a little nervous.
Well, exactly. That this kind of comes back to one of my reactions, which was just the sheer amount of discomfort, the sheer number of physiological roadblocks and barriers that are involved when you are going up there. Um, and she made a really good point about how everything will have to be planned for. And what that leads me to wonder is when you're making sex part of the mission plan and you are going up for that reason, and you've practiced and you've prepped and you've uncovered all of the mysteries that we are trying to uncover here, where does consent then come in? Because if the expectation is that you are to have sex on this mission, that is a big, there's a big power dynamic there. There's a big element of persuasion and duty and guilt and right? I mean, what do you think about that?
I, Yeah, I think there's a lot of elements to that. Obviously, consent is important. I think from the get-go, there's multiple stages of it, especially if this is like a directed mission. From the get-go, the people involved have to be consenting to the mission itself. And then from there, steps along the way, it's consenting to the practice, to the training, to the actual research itself, let's call it, and what you're looking to get out of it. And I think it's going to be a multi-layered thing because you don't want, this is already like a touchy subject, right? For the entire space industry, this is the third rail. And if you're going to look at this from like a scientific standpoint, actual studying, you know we're going to have to avoid all of the ethical stuff, right? Or not avoid it, but we're going to have to make sure we abide by all the ethical stuff. We're going to have to make sure everybody's consenting, make sure you're following proper protocol, safety, planning, training, all of that. And, everyone's going to have to be on board for it. Because if this is science, there are going to be scientists like studying the data, either in real time or later, whatever that means. And it's going to be a whole thing.
I am reminded of an anecdote that I read about where uh, scientists were trying to test run a new funnel for the purpose of collecting urine in space. And the new funnel was designed to fit with female bodies. And this was a new frontier for them because prior to the 70s, right, there were no female astronauts at all. And they knew that female astronauts were imminent. So they're testing out this P funnel, and they had some I believe they were fighter pilots, some female like test pilots who volunteered to go into a parabolic flight and have their 30 seconds or less of zero gravity, and they had to pee on command using this funnel while scientists were filming them.
Wow.
And I'm just thinking about like the pressure that they must have been feeling to perform this biological function at exactly the right moment. And when you think about somebody who maybe is being asked not to pee, not to just uh, stimulate certain muscles in the pelvic floor, but instead to have an erection, which is both a mental and physical reaction. I mean, the amount of pressure that would coincide with that moment is insane to me. Like you would have to use medication probably um
I would
to
imagine.
take that mental block away.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of stuff to consider, and the people performing these acts, hopefully are able to do so. But I think it's going to be a lot of preparation, and it also depends on like, are we doing this in a scientific setting or a casual setting? I think that also has a lot of different implications. If the first people to do this are, like I mentioned, like on like a pleasure cruise and not part of a scientific study, I think that's a lot different, right? Obviously, there's a lot of the same things and biological hurdles to get over, but you're not worried about the scientist like looking at the camera from every angle and all of that. Maybe there is practice to be done on a microgravity flight or on a parabolic flight. I've not done any peeing experiments in microgravity, but even from the experiments I was doing, in 20 to 25 seconds to set up, do the experiment, and then get prepared to leave microgravity in 20 to 25 seconds, it's a lot and it's stressful. So I could only imagine how those female fighter pilots were were doing that. Like that's super impressive.
Right. And here's the thing. Like I wonder which is more likely. Which do you think is more likely that sex in space would happen for the first time as part of a planned mission, or that sex would happen almost incidentally as a sort of secret or spontaneous activity of two individuals who go up for a pleasure cruise?
I think it's more the latter. Like I honestly think it's more likely to happen either incidentally or from space tourists or commercial astronauts under non-scientific conditions than like a planned study. Just knowing the space industry. The question is like after that, does that open the floodgates for official study? Does that change the narrative? And I honestly, I don't know.
Well, we have lots of good questions to move forward into the next episode with.
A lot more avenues to explore and discover. I think, Shayna just opened up many different places to explore and to learn about. And there's so much there, and it's going to be a journey, and I think it's going to be an exciting one.
Yeah, I can't wait. And if you are also excited, please tune in for the next episode of 0g-SPOT. We will see you back here soon.
See you then.
Bodies behave differently in space. Hydration floats, skin gets confused, sensation changes. At Ready Set Jet, we know this firsthand because we've actually been to space. RSJ is the world's first biotech skincare brand certified for space. Our Beauty Baton spent 18 days in orbit, traveling 8.4 million miles on the Axiom 4 mission. Waterless, zero mess, designed for bodies in motion, on Earth or off it. Discover Ready Set Jet, groundbreaking science, great skin, any gravity. ReadySetJetOfficial.com